Antonio, good morning. So nice to have you here on the channel.
Thank you for having me, Tomas. Good afternoon to you.
Yeah, you're based in New York, right? So it's the early hour.
Yeah, I'm in Brooklyn. I mean, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, but I get up early, so this is good.
Yeah, 9 o'clock sounds like a civilized hour already, right?
Yeah.
So
I've already had my coffee, so we're good.
Wonderful. Same here. Couple of them. So. Yeah, we will talk about your photography, obviously. You're based in New York. You have been living there for a while, I imagine, or was it always your place?
I grew up in New York City. I actually live in Brooklyn, so it's one of the outlying boroughs. But yeah, I'm a New Yorker, born and raised. But I've lived in Brooklyn longer than I've lived in than I grew up in Manhattan. I actually grew up in Manhattan. So.
Okay, well, New York, yeah, I have been there only a couple of times. What a crazy place, paradise for photographers, I would say, for many reasons. I mean, you are getting everything possible in this city.
Yeah.
And you have been photographing this city for a while. Every now and then with some breaks in between, rediscovering this city. Yeah, many times on different angles. Tell us a little bit, a little bit more about where it started for you with the photography. Where is it today? What are your fascinations?
Okay, I'll try to sum that up quickly because I'm an older guy. So
we have time. Just
Yeah, that's okay. I grew up in the film business. Actually, my mom worked in a lot of films in the city. So as a kid, I spent a lot of time on film sets, and sometimes I would be an extra in movies too. But at some point, I spent some of my money that I made when I was being an extra, and I bought a film camera, a Super 8 camera. But eventually, I traded that in for a film camera, and because I wanted to take better still pictures. And my dad was a photographer; he had been a photographer for a while, and that has no relationship to why I'm a photographer. I didn't become a photographer because he did, but he told me that I had to go to his friend's studio and learn how to develop and stuff like that. And this is when I was in 7th grade. So I've been doing this for a while. So I just took off with it. I went to high school for photography, which is really strange because in New York we have a high school called the High School of Art and Design where you can actually go and learn architecture, illustration, photography, and it was to train people to go and have a job, afterwards. So I did photography in high school. So I have actually a degree in photography in high school, which is kind of strange, yeah.
Which is kind of unusual these days, right?
It is. And I don't think anybody. Well, the school still exists, but and I haven't been there in a while, so I don't know what happens. But I went to college for photography and ended up working in. Eventually, started working in stock photo agency called the Image Bank, and my initial foray into photography was commercial stock. And not only did I work in the photo agency as an editor, but I also was a photographer and a contributor, which some people thought was a conflict of interest, but I won't get into that. It wasn't, but after that, doing photography, I couldn't wait until I was like initially very happy when digital cameras first came out. I don't think I have got my original camera someplace. I would show you.
But what was your first camera?
It was a Casio. It's a Casio. It was a little Casio with a bendy lens. It cost about $900. The screen on it was about this big, but I knew that was where I was interested in, and I was also one of the first people to work with Photoshop. I think Photoshop version 2. So I was working with that. So I was because I'm a kind of a computer geek altogether. So those mergings really happened early for me, and eventually. Just had a photo studio, and at some point that commercial photography sort of took a slow burn out as everybody else was getting into it. But I stuck with teaching. I do a lot of teaching photography, and now that I'm not doing it commercially, I'm a little bit more free to do the kind of work that I like to do, which is exploring the city. I mean, I grew up in New York City, and I've always been photographing the city, even when I was doing commercial stuff. I was, whenever I got a chance to, sort of revisit the history of New York through my camera, I would do that all the time. And I think I also, just because I grew up in the film business and photography world, like my interests were always there. My mom would always take me to the museums. So I have sort of, vague memories of very famous pictures that I would see. And I get the feeling that sort of influenced me over time. And now that I recognize, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the picture that I loved when I was a kid. I don't know why, So, so eventually I started doing more. I'm also sort of as freelance. I also work in videography, and I do television production freelance in a place in Brooklyn called Brick. It's an arts organization, and they have a professional television studio there for local Brooklyn stuff. And so I work there, and I still do that work. But I also teach there photography. But before that, after I got out of commercial photography, I really started getting into street photography, especially when I moved I live in an apartment in a different section of Brooklyn that I've been spending most of my time in, and I started doing more street photography in this area. And I just got into recording people on the streets, and that became sort of my signature, my late signature. So.
Well, okay, thank you so much for the summary, right? So now, I had a couple of people here on the channel already, and I feel like what you just described, you have been basically doing, all of them have been doing combined. So like you have done it all, I feel, right?
I think so. Yeah, it's sort of a jack of all trades kind of thing, but yeah.
Okay. So, and exactly, you sent some images my way. I have like around 25 images from you. I think predominantly or only from New York City, right?
Actually, as I'm looking at it, every single picture is actually it's all from Brooklyn.
It's all from Brooklyn. Okay.
It's all from Brooklyn. Yeah.
Yeah. I was, browsing through the images before we started recording again, and trying to put my finger on what is it that really fascinates you. And I have to say, it's not so easy. I can feel it. There are some parallels between all the things you have been doing, but also all the things now in the photography, street photography, which fascinate you, because I can see you are going after different subject, different looks, different subject matters, and so on. Would you be able to pinpoint something like a common denominator, or what is it that you are after? What fascinates you? What we are looking for on those streets?
Oh boy, that's a big one, because New York is so big. Let's see. Well, the pictures I sent you sort of have two parts to them. There's some pictures of people, and there's some pictures of not people, and sort of there's a decided break in my style of photography. And I think I might have mentioned to you last year my wife died, and she died of cancer, and before that, we had that coincided with the pandemic and the lockdown. And before that, I was more interested in, recording the people of the streets. And now I've sort of gone back to sort of took a step back. I think it's the delineation of after my wife passed away that I changed a bit. But I'm still like the underlying thing for me about New York City is, first of all, the change that we're going through. I mean, changes in my life a lot, and as I just mentioned, but New York City or any place that's been around a while in New York, in the United States, which is, compared to Europe, this is not old. Like a couple 100 years is not,
right.
These are old. But I'm very interested in trying to maintain sort of an archive of the way I think it's the way I grew up, or the way I remember growing up in New York City. And not that I'm nostalgic to go back, because when I grew up, it was pretty much a hellhole, I think. but there are aspects to older New York, older Brooklyn, older times that is sort of being erased. And I understand that, because that's the nature of
progress
of progress. And we have to do that. But there's some sort of sadness to that. But I seem to keep finding bits and pieces of New York that remind me of my past, or remind me of the history of New York, and I try to capture that as much as possible.
Basically one of the nicest and most, if not the most important thing about what photography is all about, actually capturing, freezing the time, capturing scenes and parts of our life and places which are going away, slowly fading away. So I think this is a wonderful idea, and can I ask you, and once more, I feel so sorry for the loss of your wife, please, on this, it's maybe it's a difficult question in a way, but, I have also been going through some, difficult moments in my life already. And on the emotional level, as a photographer, and, like you mentioned, losing your wife combined with the changes in the city, what did it do to you, like on this emotional level? Does an event like this, in somebody's life, puts you on pause for a minute? Did you think a much more on a deeper level about what you are going to do with your photography going forward? What happened? What happens in such moment, and where is it today?
Well, let me just say it's still in transition. I'm still feeling that out. I mean, it's been over a year since she passed away, and trying to come to terms with my own life and trying to integrate that death into me is not easy. I felt like I've crossed some threshold. Like now I'm on this end of being a grieving widower, and there's no linear timeline to that. And that's certainly reflected in my photography, or at least where I'm trying to feel things out. To me, the emotional part of it is like, first of all, going out with my camera, being able to go out and like take pictures again and care about photography is a long process. During the 2 years before that, it was really difficult to do that because there was stress and caretaking, and the pictures that I took, were just more capturing imagery rather than creating something. And now I feel there's a little bit more, there's a freedom. Not that it's because she passed away, but there's a freedom for me to sort of open up to what's going on. Because essentially, the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Like, so, what can I lose by sort of experimenting and taking pictures now? I have nothing to lose right now.
Was she into photography herself?
She was not. When she was growing up, she was. In fact, I found some of her negatives from her schooling, and I think that was part of the interest that we had together. But she was a copywriter for most of her career. But she did have photography, so like I'm planning to scan her negatives or take a peek at them and see what that's like. But like the only other comparison I have is that a while back I got divorced from my first wife, and I also found a moment of creative energy at that time, because at that time I was like, the worst thing in the world has happened to me, so what do I care if I blow up my prints to 17 by 50 or whatever like that. Like, I don't care. And I think that's what's going on now. It's like, I'm losing this inhibition to experiment. And a lot of that also comes from when I was doing commercial photography, especially stock photography, I was so oriented in looking at my imagery or what I was going to take a picture of. How is that going to make money? How is that going to be marketed? How can I, and to lose that is a really important thing, to lose this kind of saying, well, I don't really care. But it's taking me a long time. It's taking me actually much longer than it did last time. So you
still have this commercial part, right? Of you being a photographer. You are running a business.
I don't do commercial photography anymore. No, if I do, it's occasionally someone hires me for a job, but no, I'm mostly interested in instructing new photographers, like beginning photographers, but my own photography is more about what I want to do and has nothing to do with making money. Although, if I've been selling some prints here and there, which is really kind of an honor when someone wants to spend their money.
Yeah. Let me share. This is just for us here now, but let me share. I hope you can you see it?
It's coming up. Yep. Yeah. That. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to share a few photographs, or in this case, let's start with this particular series of those hydrants, right?
Yes.
I mean, it looks really impressive as a series, as a collage kind of here, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about this series. Are you fascinated with those hydrants, or amazing collection?
I've always been fascinated by fire hydrants. It's one of those artifacts in New York City that if you look back at very, very old pictures, the design has not, for the most part, changed that much. And walking around in my neighborhood, because I walk every day, I started to find that people were doing sort of all sorts of designs and painting them, which you're not supposed to do legally. and then I'm sort of a collector too. As photographers, we collect, and it occurred to me that I was looking back through my collection of pictures. I'm like, wow, I actually go around and photograph these hydrants. So I decided to continue and look for these things in my walks all the time and see if I can find some unique features. And recently I went to an exhibit at the Metropolitan. This was last year, the Metropolitan Museum of Art of Bernd and Hilla Becher, their typology collection of industrial and farm buildings in New York and United States and Europe. And I've always been fascinated about like that kind of collecting. Now, I'm not saying that my work is anything like that, but this idea of collecting and looking at similarities of stuff. And I actually just recently decided to put all these pictures together as a single collection and see what they look like. And I was really sort of blown away by it a little bit. And it's one of those things that, this is what I think about New York, is what I'm sort of interested in, looking at things that people sort of pass by every day. And nobody pays attention to fire hydrants except dogs, maybe. But
absolutely, I think it's it happens once in a while that the photographer decides to, exactly, it happens maybe naturally, and then like you say, you realize it after the fact, or at some point that you had probably 50 images of those. But it starts from some kind of fascination, maybe emotional, visual, or combination of those. But then when you end up with such series, you are maybe one of two in the world who have done it actually on a regular basis. And this becomes a story, becomes a series, and it can become a book. Who says why not, right? This would be an amazing book with some commentary, maybe, accompanying those.
Yeah, well, funny that you mentioned that, because I've been on this series of printing zines, because why not, again. And I already have a plan for this one. I already have the cover picture made for the Hydrants book, and
here we go.
I want to do that. It'd be interesting to see them printed out or brought out into the real world and looked at as objects of fascination.
Yeah,
yeah.
I can see these also being printed. For example, it's a different project, but being printed very big. In a huge museum hall, like big prints hanging out there. I mean, it's very impressive kind of series, where you start looking at it one by one.
I have some plans in that direction. Actually, I'm going to be having a show in a local cafe, I think in the end of September, early October, and I'm going to print this one as a centerpiece, pretty large. Again,
wonderful, nice. Okay, let's switch gears now. Have a look at this one. I mean, this is a completely different shot.
The penguin.
I absolutely love it. I love it. It's a graphical shot. It's a what's going on? Who is it here? There is so many features to this image. I mean, both visually, storytelling. Tell us more about this one.
Well, it's an actually easy story. In Brooklyn, we have every June, there's a big parade in Coney Island called the Mermaid Parade. And everybody who goes there dresses up as some sort of aquatic creature, or, mermaid or merman, as it were. And there's a big parade, but before the parade starts, you have an opportunity to photograph people in their costumes. And this lone guy was by himself in a corner someplace, playing the trumpet, and I decided to I grabbed it. I originally grabbed it in color, but when I looked at it, I was like, to me, penguins are all about black and white anyway. And so
I was about to ask you, what made you going for black and white here? But exactly, makes sense.
Yeah, and it strikes me as one of the again, one of these underlying things about Brooklyn or New York City that nobody seems to you sort of overlook. I mean, not that the Mermaid Parade is not popular, but I like this idea of this sort of lone person doing something odd and getting noticed by my camera. So
definitely also idea for a series here. Looking for those individuals. So maybe just around this parade. I don't know the event, but okay. Let me switch now again to something completely different. Well, this one.
Okay. Barber shops. So. Let me give that. I've always loved barber shops. I grew up. My grandfather was from Cuba, and he had a barber shop in Harlem, in Manhattan, Upper Manhattan. So I spent a lot of time as a kid in the barber shop, and I remember his style and the smells and stuff like that. And I've gone to barbershops a lot, and I don't have any hair anymore, but like this barbershop, I would go and like I would trim my hair a little bit, whatever was left of my hair. And it was an old style barbershop in my neighborhood. It's actually not a few blocks away. And people would say, why would we go to barbershop? You know what I mean? I was like, I like the feel. I like going there. I like talking to the guy, and there's a feel for it. And every now and then when I go there, I'd get there early and I'd wait and get in, and I would try to take pictures of the place. The sad thing is it didn't survive the pandemic, and now it's closed. And again, it has that feel to me of a part of, this is actually more personal because I was a part of New York that I kind of grew up with and I feel for, and I get the smells and the feel and the textures and stuff like that. And so there's something poignant to this. And I am going to make I don't know how many pictures I have of this barbershop, but I might incorporate it into one of my zines as a section about things that are going away.
Yeah. Speaking of zines, so you sent the issue number 1 of your zine, I will be sharing it here on the screen with our viewers, so the title is, it's actually the postal code, right, of your neighborhood.
Code, yeah.
11218 plus, so it means some more surroundings adding to it.
Yeah.
Tell me about what made you, work on this first zine, the idea of zines, maybe explain it, and what does it, help you, or you feel it, helps you on your growth as a photographer. It's publishing, right? It's publishing your own work.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, if not, I've had to be inspired a bit by Frames magazine, because, well, actually,
I will take it as a,
well, take it. Yeah, please take it as a compliment, because, you're actually one of the first magazines photography magazines I've subscribed to in the more recent past that is sort of akin to a history of photography magazines I grew up with that are no longer around. And so part of this was a practical thing about bringing my imagery into the real world, right? Because I spend so many time looking at my pictures on screens, and the other part of it is practical. It's not expensive to do, to do these zines now. It's very easy to do, but I've been sitting around on my butt, saying, one of these days I'm going to print, one of these days I'm going to print. And it's like, it takes me 10 minutes to set it up. So I was like, okay, let's do it. But what am I going to do? Well, since I've been doing these morning walks since my wife died, and I'm walking around with my camera, my area of walking, I try to get like 2 or 3 miles every day. And I can only go so far in my walking, and I record things, And I said, well, what am I going to do with these pictures? How am I going to, at least for myself, because again, a little bit of like the thinking of mortality and like, imagery is if I pass away and it's on a screen, nobody's going to see it anymore. So like, how can I bring this into the world? And one of the things I've been finding out is that I share my images on my walks with local Facebook groups from my neighborhood. There's 2 or 3 that I find. And also, this also means that I'm trying to collapse my world a little bit, right? Thinking locally, And so anyway, the idea came about the zip code, and the idea came is like, how can I bring these pictures into the world, and how can I have something that is going to outlast me in some way? And
so you're printing them, right? Physically printing them?
Yeah, I'm printing them. I got here's. In fact, I just did a second copy. This is the second one. Is out. 11218 plus issue 2, but yeah, I'm printing them with a company called Blurb. Okay.
And how many you print them, or people can order them and print on demand, or both, what's the process?
Both. Yeah, I did set up. What's nice about Blurb is you can set up a print on demand, and so I've had people, I've pointed people to purchasing them if they want to buy my images, and then I'm also printing out some and sending them out as sort of samplers or something. And in fact, I just sold a print a few weeks ago, and I threw in a zine for the person who bought it, and they just texted me this morning, say they read my opening on my first zine, which really talks about my journey, about where the zine came from, and again about my transition from being a husband to a widower, and how she resonated with that, because she had some similar things happening to her from moving from Poland to the United States, and so she resonated with exactly what I was going through, and that's kind of what I wanted to do. Is I want to explain to people where this is coming from in me, and that it is, in a sense, also a transitional journey for me as I try to figure out what am I doing as a photographer, what do I want. But at least I have my neighborhood, and at least I have these things that I can see and point out to people, which is what I think photography is about, is like being able to point out things to people who don't necessarily see the stuff all the time.
Absolutely. I was just not, it was just a couple of hours ago, actually. So I'm based in Lucerne, Switzerland, small town. We live somewhere, each of us, and we have our own neighborhood, which only we know better than anybody else. So I think it's always the most wonderful idea, actually, to document a place, to capture things which we are emotionally connected to. Like, I think that's where you can actually produce the strongest photography, right? The most, packed emotionally, places, angles, the streets, corners no tourist will ever see, right? And show it to the other parts of the world, to all today with the internet, there had been books in the past from famous photographers, where they were capturing basically pictures of their own street, and that was the entire book. So I think the idea is beautiful.
Thank you.
And
I'm a bit inspired, like, if I wanted to like latch onto one photographer from the past, is Bernice Abbott. In fact, there's a show of her work right now at the Metropolitan Museum, which I've seen twice. I'll probably go back and see it a third time. And, she recorded where she lived, which is New York, and created photo albums of small little pictures, which she had printed at, the local drugstore and stuff like that. And I've always loved her work. And I think that's she's sort of an underlying hero of mine in terms of when I decide to photograph what I know, and it's kind of like, being a writer. It's something like you write about what you know. Like, I'm photographing what I know. But it's also helping me explore things that I don't know. Like, there's parts of, exploration of my neighborhood in my local area that I'm learning about.
Do you have any preference when it comes to black and white versus color? Because I can see examples of both of those styles in your work.
There's no preference. There's a bit of love of both. If you're gonna put me on the spot and say, you're gonna be on a desert island and what are you gonna do, I'll probably stick with black and white. Because color for me it's still working out its commercialness to it. I know the history of photography, and I know how color has always been, sort of put on the side sometimes as not an art form and whatever. And it's just where I grew up. But black and white just holds something just a little bit more for me. So I would say it's a preference. But lately I've been doing a lot more color work, and like the fire hydrant work. I think that it's all about the color, and
absolutely.
But there's aspects of New York City to me and Brooklyn that feel a bit more black and white.
Yeah, this kind of timeless feeling to it, and especially when capturing those.
And that's how I grew up too. That's
no, wonderful.
I started on.
Antonio, I mean, I can see you're really enjoying it all. And are you going out today?
Actually, I am. I usually would go out before we talk, but I set my morning up so that I would get all my stuff done, and it's early enough that I can go out for. I want to do my 2 mile walk, so I'll bring. I'll schlep my GFX camera with my medium format and see what I can capture. I'm probably not much because I've done a lot, but who knows? Yeah.
No, wonderful. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing the images with us, your story, and wonderful. I mean, I hope all your plans, dreams come true when it comes to exhibitions, books in the future. Yeah, fingers crossed. Yeah, I will be following whatever you are doing on the Frames community. I will be linking to everything. You make sure you send me also the link where people get your and thank you so much. See you around in the community.
I'm very honored to be hanging out with you this morning. I very much appreciate the time
and
your interest in my work. Is great.
Wonderful passion, wonderful work. That's what it's all about. After all. So thank you so much for making this time, and talk soon. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye bye.